Have you ever laid in bed alone with witches in your closet and hands reaching out to grab you from underneath your bed and thought to yourself, is this the scariest thing that's ever happened? It probably wasn't, but I'll tell you what is.
Death Ride. Late one evening, on a dark back road, a husband rushes to get home before his wife can question where he has been. Most of the trip the husband was able to speed and was making good time, but then came a problem, a tiny blue car driving slowly blocking his way. The turns were sharp and he could not easily get around the car without risking his life, and the life of the car in front of him. Barely able to see on the dark unlit road, he made his move around the tiny blue car that was going way too slow for him. He couldn't see around the turn. Was there a car in the oncoming lane? It wasn't safe, but he was in a rush, and his impatience got the best of him. He made it side by side to the tiny blue car, and you could see there was no cars coming towards him. He tried to look at the driver of the tiny blue car. Although he couldn't see the driver, he made a disgusted look at them, and turned back to look at the road. He had not estimated how sharp the turn was, and now he was heading off the shoulder and into the woods. In a panic, he violently turned back into the lane in front of the tiny blue car. However, he turned too sharp, and he clipped the tiny blue car in the front and had pushed it off the road. As he rounded the turn, he lost sight of the tiny blue car. Had they gone off the road? Had they crashed? Were they hurt? Were they dead? He panicked. Should he go back? What if they needed help? He thought about going back. Then he thought if they were hurt or even dead, he would be to blame. So he fled the scene of the accident, never looking back to see what damage he had done. Besides, he had to get home before his wife noticed he was gone. He continued down the dark road. It got darker and darker every minute. He didn't see any other cars, and the woods blocked the light from the moon. He was totally alone, speeding and aggressively making his way through the wooded back road. As he drove, he noticed lights in the rearview mirror. He was relieved to see another car. It took his mind off the accident and the fear of being caught, coming home late by his wife. But as the car gets closer and closer, he notices the car is speeding up to him, and the car's lights are blindingly bright. At first he couldn't see because of the blinding dark. Now he can't see because of the blinding light, so he drives faster to get away from the flooding lights. He drives faster and faster, but the car gets closer and closer. Was it the car he ran off the road, coming back for revenge? No. He can see now it's a large black truck, evil looking, getting closer and closer. He thinks about slowing down and pulling over and letting the truck pass. But he is going too fast now. If he slows down, he will surely be hit by the truck. So he drives faster and faster around the sharp turns and steep hills on the dark wood road. The lights were blinding and the speed was terrifying. What did this driver want? He looks in his rearview mirror to see if he can see a face. Who was it? What was it? Then, as fast as they came, they disappeared. There was no truck on the road, no lights, but he was still speeding down the road at an incredible speed. He was all alone in the darkness. Then he noticed a different set of lights. The lights of a police car in the near distance. He slowed, and now a different panic and terror set in. Would the officer see the dents and scratches on his car from the accident? Would he question him? Did the officer already know about the accident? Was there someone killed in the accident? Now the man was sweating and trembling horribly as he saw the officer approach. The officer approached the car as the man rolled down his window. The officer didn't ask for his license. He just stared at the man with an evil glare. The man interrupted the silence by apologizing and saying he was sorry for speeding. He lost track of the speed limit. The officer just stared. The man noticed the officer looked dead. Large black bags underneath of his eyes, and an evil stare. The officer stood silent. The man then tried to explain there was another car speeding and chasing him. "Please, officer," the man begged. The officer still silent. Then he spoke.
Where are you going?
The man was confused, but glad the officer talked and explained. "I'm going home. I'm sorry again for speeding. Please." Before the man could finish, the officer walked back to his car. The man wondered if he was caught. Did the officer know who he was? Did he know he had caused an accident? But before he could think about the strange way the officer had acted, the officer started his car and sped away, leaving the man in his car alone on the dark, deserted road. What had just happened? Was he in a nightmare? He sat alone, quietly. Then he heard the eerie moans of the creatures in the woods. They howled. They screamed, terrifying screams. He didn't know what to think. He didn't know what terrified him more. Not knowing if he had killed someone, not knowing if the person in the truck was coming back to hunt him down, not knowing how they had disappeared so quickly without a trace. And what was wrong with that officer, and why did he look dead? Sitting in his car alone on the side of the road in the dark, with all the terrifying screams from the black forest, was too much. He didn't care if his wife had caught him coming home late. He just wanted to go home. He quickly started his car and drove off. He picked up speed faster and faster, until he felt comfortable again. No cars on the road. He was alone. He started to comfort himself by telling himself no one was hurt in that accident. There were no trucks out to get him. They were all just strange coincidences. He laughed, until he saw it. Tiny bright lights in the distance of his rear-view mirror. The lights were back. He was determined not to get caught. He was determined to outrun the lights. He sped faster and faster, but the truck was clearly catching up to him. What did they want? Who were they? He drove faster and faster, but the truck caught him, blinding him with its lights. Then he heard it, a terrifying scream. He looked into the rearview mirror and he could see it. Horrified, he could see the driver of the truck, and it was screaming at him. It was a skeleton, with its skull face screaming at him. Now he couldn't slow down. He had to drive as fast as his car could go. He couldn't be caught by this horrible creature. He had to escape. He drove wildly down the steep hills and around the sharp turns, faster and faster. But the skeleton in the black truck never backed off, and got closer and closer, to just about ramming the back of his car, screaming. The violently screaming skeleton pushed him further and faster until... Then, silence. Shortly after, the police arrived to find the wreck and found the man had crashed into some trees in the woods and died instantly. He was still sitting in his car seat, with his face frozen with a look of terror, as if he was trying to scream. The officers, however, were confused that there was only one car at the scene of the wreck. But there had clearly been 2 tire tracks and 2 separate cars, so where was the other car? Both tire tracks indicated they were going the same speed, in the same direction, at the same time, yet only one car had crashed. The other tracks disappeared into the woods. There should have been 2 cars wrecked in the woods that night, yet one had simply disappeared.
Thank you for listening, and remember, the next scariest thing to ever happen may just happen to you.
Created by Eric Supervillain Millen. Sound effects from freesound.org. Full list of sound effects at theSCARIESTthing.com. Music by Kevin MacLeod. Incompetech.com.